Right, here we go. SyncroGearbox slick shift for the Land Rover Defender, specifically a TD5 for me. Everything you need to change it over the gear throw to make it a shorter shift. Right, so first up we've got a pivot pin, a new one. It's slightly longer than the old one, and this is what will create that shorter throw of the gear change. I'm not sure whether mine is worn or what's worn on mine, but I've tried adjusting the Bayou Springs on the one that's currently on. I'm just going to take off. I've had numerous goes of it and I just cannot get it to work. I've looked at these slick shifts before and I wasn't sure whether it would actually benefit or not. I'm going to give it a go. Hopefully this might cure some of the problems, but also I'm looking at replacing the clutch slave cylinder as well as a package of measures to try and make it a better gear change. Like I say, I've changed the Bayou Springs on the current setup that I've got and I just cannot get it to work. So hopefully all of this kit, that's the socket. You see, that could be worn on mine. That's one thing I'm thinking of mine. Something's worn on it. Definitely on the top where the springs sit on this thing. Mine will be worn, I can see that. There's some damage on there. So that, you got the ball locator cup. You get the extra long bolts which you're going to need due to the fact you're going to be placing this spacer underneath the actual gearbox turret. So that's about a lift of about 20mm, something like that. So hopefully it's going to go on smoothly. I've had the gear stick assembly and the turret and all of that apart before. In the last year or so I've messed around with it, so most of the nuts and bolts should be fine for coming off. Remember, they were quite tight, but they're about quite a large size, so they should come off quite easy. Shouldn't snap them. There's one problem is going to be this thing. I'm hoping there's a grub screw on there and I'm hoping it's not corroded too badly. It's Loctited on and I've never taken that off before, so I'm hoping the grub screw will come out easy enough so that I can replace this. And once I've taken it all off, I'll have a look at the wear on it and hopefully I can find out why I'm not getting a good gear selection. If I mess around with the Bayou Springs, I get a good first to second, but third to fourth will be rubbish, and then I mess around some more, third and fourth will be good and first to second will be rubbish. And it used to be a really good gear change in mine, but not anymore. So hopefully this bit of kit will help me a little bit in understanding what's going on. And it's had a new clutch on mine. I didn't fit it, someone else fitted that, and I'm not sure whether they've done a good job or not. But since it's had the clutch and chassis done on mine, this is when I've started having these issues. So it's definitely not the clutch. It's had new thrust washer put on, and the Bayou Springs I've been messed around with and I still can't get it to work. So I'm going to go outside, it's freezing cold, and I'm going to do my best to get it done in the 15 minutes that it says. Filming it's going to take a little bit longer, I suspect, but because I've messed around in there before, I know what to expect, and most of the bolts should be loose enough for me to back off quite easy. So let's get outside and get some spannering done. Right, here we go. First of all, remove the gaiter. Some of these are zip tied on or held on with something or other. Now normally you would remove the gear knob and the diff lock knob, but on mine these are actually Loctited on, and to stop them twisting around, I managed to get them Loctited on that well. I don't really want to break them off. So I'm going to do a bit of fiddle here and just leave them on and pull the gaiter up out the way. I've done it before, so I know it works, but it's certainly a lot easier if you do remove the gear knob and then pull the gaiter off, but I can still get access, so it's not a problem. Now people will have different setups here. Once I get this out of the way, let's see. First thing that has to come off is the actual shifter itself, and this is a 17mm spanner, and you should easily be able to crank that off. Again, this is all going to be loose because I've been messing around with mine a little bit prior to this, trying to get the Bayou Springs set. Now this is just on a spline, should pull off easy enough, and I'm going to have to tuck this out of the way to get access, like that. Now this, some people will have it, some people won't. It's just sound insulation. Depends who's had your Land Rover before and put it back together, whether they can be bothered to have put it back or not. Again, I can't get this over the gear knobs properly, so I'm just going to pull it out the way. As you can see, I can get good access, but it'd just be easy if you can take all of this out the way, but I know I can do it. Next up, again, this is like the turret cover. Stops water and dirt getting in. It's on really tight, but again, mine's loose because I've messed around with it, and you can pull it off easy enough. Some might have this on, some may not. It doesn't matter, just deal with it. Like I say, this does, it's got like a lip and it tucks under, but you can rive it up. When I put it back on, you'll see that it is quite durable, and you can be quite rough and firm with it. So that's that off. Next up, this is the turret and the selector. As you can see, mine's not in bad shape. I don't think they're worn at the side. These slots down the side on the turret get worn. I'll have a look at that when I take it off and see whether it needs replacing. I hope not, because I don't have one to replace it with. Next up, it's all, I think it's all, yeah, 10mm spanners. You can take the whole turret off and then mess around with the top part, but I find it's easier to get the springs off and then take the turret off the actual main unit later on. Just works out easier. You can do it either way, works out easier for me, I think. Now, first of all, these are locking nuts lower down, and I also find if you back these springs off, the nuts off a little bit, so you want to drive those in a bit just to get away from the Bayou Springs. Again, it gives you a little bit more room for manoeuvre when you're taking it off. Same with this side, just drill them down. Mine are slightly loose because it's been off already, and then you can pop your Bayou Springs off. And this looks pretty brutal, but firm but fair, I think the order of the day is. These should just slide off, one off. People say these are fiddly, but they're not. Just use quite a large size screw and they should pop off easy enough. So that's those two done. Next up, we want this fella out, and it's held in place now by this 10mm bolt and a washer. Just undo that. And put that somewhere safe. Now when you slide this thing out, there is a spring on it, which, let me find the new one. This is the one that's going to go and replace it. So there's a spring setup that slides into this hole, and it faces backwards this way. So when you draw this out, make sure you catch the spring. It's not that difficult, just, there we go, out in one. It didn't fly out, and that's the part we need to keep, which I've just dropped on the floor, and that's the other part I need to keep as well. Put them down there. You can see that's the difference that you are going to get. It's probably about 20mm longer, similar height, and I'm hoping, I mean, I can't see much wear on that one, to be honest. It doesn't look horrendous. I'll have a better inspection once I've cleaned it up and see whether I can see any wear that may be causing me the trouble that I'm having. Right, next up are the 4 turret bolts on each corner. Quite easy to see, but not on the video. There's a second one. There's one right up here, and obviously opposite handed on that side. all you need is a 10mm socket and a extension bar. Now I've cracked these off a little bit just to make it easier. Once you've got them started, they shouldn't be rusted in too badly. So that's those four started off. I'm going to manually crank them out. These are the ones which are going to be replaced anyway, so you can discard those. Now I have had this turret off about 12 months or so ago. I was looking for a leak, and I've actually taken this off before and I put a new sealant around it. So it should all be clean and dry in there in theory. And that's going to get hung up on the Bayou spring. Once you've got these bolts moving, you should be able to do them by hand. But filming and trying to unscrew them is slightly harder. Finally, the last one. I've got one of these wobble bar extensions here just so I can get a better angle on them. Quite useful usually on a Land Rover, especially when nothing seems to be straightforward. So that's that fella out. Right, so now this has got a seal on, so it should be a little bit gnarly to get off on mine. So we're going to have to give it a hit with a mallet to get it loose. I'm going to have to give this a bash with the persuader. Do not use a metal one, use a wooden or a rubber one, and do not smack it as hard as you possibly can. Just coax it out, it should break the seal. Mine is proper sealant on there. I think the original is a paper gasket. I can feel it moving anyway. There we go, that'll do. And we have one. I'll take this outside so I can have a better look at it. Doesn't look so bad. It's a bit worn on the slots there. No, I don't think that's too bad. I'd say that's pretty acceptable to use again. I'll clean this up before I put it back on. The same with, I'm surprised there's not much sealant on there. I thought I'd put more sealant on there than that, but there we go. This is the cup that's going to come out. Again, this is an item that would wear. And first of all, there is the dreaded grub screw. Now mine doesn't look too bad. These can get corroded because they get water, and depends on how wild you are with your Defender. So this is a T30 Allen key. I prefer the socket ones because you can get a much better leverage, and these tend to round off. So I'm hoping if I can get this on the top of it. To move in, but it is stiff. That's a worry. Come on, that's it, got it. Whew, didn't think that was going to go then. I've got it. This was the only worry about this job I had. and it is thread locked, so that needs thread lock going on, needs a clean up and some thread lock on it. Good, happy about that. And there we go, there's that fella, which we're going to replace this cup. Oh, that is quite worn. And it does have a circlip on the bottom. This needs to be relieved, so I'll go in the garage and do that. Take the circlip off and clean it up. I don't know if it's worn or just quite grubby. Right, I'm happy about that. Let's go clean it up. Come on. I've got it. That was gnarly to get off. Hold one out. New one in, and then do battle somehow getting this back on. Come on. Go on. It's almost there. It's crazy tight around that back edge. It's not seated right. I need to spin that round somehow. Oh, that's tough. Right, I'm going to have to knock that round a little bit to get the circlip in the right place. But that is pretty much ready to go back in once I've tapped him in somehow. Right, I've managed to jiggle the circlip on the bottom, and remember it does go on the bottom, so when you come to replace it, make sure the circlip's on the bottom. I just span it round. There's like a little shoulder at the back edge here, which was a little bit gnarly to get round, but I was able to just spin the circlip round, and it's good to go. Now this was quite tight when it came off, so you have to line it back up with the obvious hole that's on that shaft there. So, oh, he's gone in easy. So that's lined up, and then fortunately for me, the grub screw is still stuck onto this. Right, so this is just a bit of Loctite I'm going to put on our thread lock. I say a bit, that's way too much, but that's exactly why my gear knob wouldn't come off. Right, see if I can line this up. Ooh, that is not going to go in without a fight. Right, go in. And I don't think I've lined that up right. I'll have to go easy with that. I'm not happy with that. Not happy with that either. I think it's in. No, I'm not happy. I'm going to have a look at that to make sure it's lined up. I wasn't happy with the way it went in. And I think I was right to do that. That's it. That's better. I could just see it was sitting a little bit proud of where it was when I took it off. It wasn't sitting in the hole, but this one is. That's good enough. Right, I need to get a bit of that excess thread lock off, and yeah, it's sitting flush. Right, happy with that. Next up, I've cleaned the sealant off all of the flange on here, and somewhere around here is the old turret. There it is. I'm going to reuse this turret. I've cleaned this up as well, it wasn't too bad, and I've looked at those. They look okay. Have a wipe of those. I've seen people with a lot worse than that. There's a bit of wear there on that part, and yeah, there's wear on there as well. That's more from the spring. I don't really have an option to replace it because I don't have one with me. So I'll clean out of this as well and grease it back up later. It's not bad, but it's not great as well. It's sort of as to be expected kind of wear for this age of car. So I'll go and put that back on. A couple need greasing up a little bit. Right, let's get back on with what I'm supposed to be doing. Right, so next up is, let's have a look. It's going to be this fella, which is the spacer. A very nice piece of billeted aluminium. That is nicely made, it's got to be said. Just a shame it's hidden. Right, see the orientation of this. It will go that way up, judging by those which are higher at the top. Let's have a test fit. Looks pretty good to me. It's hung up on something there. Not sure what. Right. Holes are slightly oversized, so it gives you a bit of scope for jiggling it around. So I need to make sure all that's clean. That is going to go on that way, keep him like that. I'm going to put a bead of sealant, proper masking sealant, proper gasket, and I need to make sure it's continuous all the way. Not too much, just make sure it's got a good seal. Whoa, good start. Okay, that's not too bad. It's a bit thin there. Right, stop that. Next up, get this as close as I possibly can, which is that way up. And just jiggle it round a bit to get the sealant in. Next up, more sealant. That's not great, but it will do. Okay, looks good. Get that out the way. Next up, we have the turret. You know what, I can't remember which way around it went. It's that way around, isn't it? The Bayou Springs towards the back of the vehicle. So I'm just going to sit that on. Again, I'll just jiggle him around to get a good seal. First of all with the gasket, it's gone on pretty good. These are the new bolts. With split washers, or split rings, some call them. Just get a couple in to locate it. In the corners. I do not want to drop anything down there, otherwise it's going to be all afternoon looking for the parts. That's not going in, go on. Right, that's in. And that's two in. I've no idea if these have a torque setting or not. I'm just going to use a bit of common sense on them to tighten them up. Don't worry about that. I'm looking for the other washer I dropped. Multitasking like a boss. And finally, I'm not sure what size they are. I don't know if they're the same. Look, a slightly bigger bolt head than the one I took off. That's it, keeping in with Land Rover tradition of nothing being standardised. Let's see if a 10mm will work. No, it's going to be 11 or 12. Right, found it at last. 13mm. God. Living with Land Rovers. If you've got one, you'll know what I mean. Right, take these down. We're on the homeward stretch now. That rubber gaiter is getting in the way a bit, but start to tighten up that one. Come on. Right, here we go. Just nipping all of these up. We're getting there. Next up, we have the new pivot, which somehow has to sneak in there. It needs to be greased up a little bit, and it needs to have, it's also you recover your spring and this plastic button thing. No idea what it does, but if it came off it, yeah, I suppose you better go back in. Could do with a clean up that. It's got a bit of a sharp edge on there. Right, I'm just going to cut that off. I never noticed that before. It's got like a bit of a burr on there. Right, I've just taken the clean-up of this. It had a bit of a burr on the edge. I think it's more of the process of making it. It probably didn't affect the operation of it, but I've chopped that off. And that will slide in there, and you need to push it in when you put this into the actual turret. So first up, so I'm just going to lightly grease this thing up. It's mainly the lower half you need to grease up, and I've just dropped the spring. Uh-oh, I think that went down the hole as well. Oh, my worst nightmare. Alright, I'll finish greasing this thing up and then I'll go hunting the spring, which I said I'll look after. Oh, nightmare. It's freezing out here as well. Schoolboy error. Right, this is going to sit in there with the spring thingamajiggy when I hunt it down. I think it went down through that gap. Fairly certain of it. Oh, nightmare. Alright, panic over. I found it. If someone said to me, where was the last place you wanted to drop this spring, it's exactly the place I dropped it. Unbelievable. Right, I'm going to grease this up a bit more. I'm not happy with the amount I've got on there. I don't think you need loads on there, just I didn't have much on at all. That's better. I'm happy with that. See if I can get this in. There you go. You can do it with your hand. Right, next up we need the little screw bolt, I should say, that goes in there, and that will retain this fella. And I think that's a 10mm. He's tight. Go on. Come on, come on, come on. It is freezing, my hands are now numb. Right, that's that. Next up, the Bayou Springs. This is a bit people say is tricky, but I've not had that much trouble with them, to be quite honest with you. So this spring has to lift up over this lug on the pivot, and then it sits on top of these, and then you adjust these to suit. So I'll try and pop this one over. Sometimes it's better to use two. I'm going to use two. One to lift it and then one to prise it over. Smooth as butter. That's that one. Same with this. It's not as smooth, but I've almost got it. Come on. There you go. Just make sure they're both knocked over. That's pretty much it fitted, essentially. Oh, it feels stiff at the moment. Right, so next up you need to adjust the balance of these biased springs, and this is where it gets a little bit trial and error. In the Haynes manual it does give you a setting for feeler gauges. I think it's 0.5 milli, 0.05 milli, and it didn't work for me, but that might be because mine was that worn out. So first off you need to slam it in two, and you need your gear shift on this one to get it in. So that's in. No idea what gear that's in. That's 1, 2, that's about third. Fourth, I'll do it. Third or fourth. And just bring both of the... Oh, let's bring both of those bolts up. Just so they're touching the bias spring. Same with this one. And that will get you somewhere near. These bolts take the pressure of this spring, so you just need them so they're lifting up from these lugs that are on this main pivot. So I've come up to them. I'm just going to back them off so they push against the spring a little bit. Oh, they're fiddly to get into with this fuse box in the way. Come on. Could do with that fuse box out the way on this side. Got it. Right, I've just taken the pressure off. Go one more. And then tighten the lock nut down. And I'm hoping that is somewhere near for that one, and same on this side. Just need to... You're effectively loosening the bolt to lift the spring. Again, bring the lock nut down. I think another half turn-ish for good luck. I'd say we're there. This may need some trial and error, it's got to be said. But that's a pretty good space setting, and I'm happy with that. So now, next up, it is a case of either sound insulation in. Squeeze that in. And also we need to, I'll tell you what I'll put on first, this gaiter. Because this hooks up under those springs, so I'll get the gaiter on. You'll see it's quite tough, this thing, so you can be quite brutal with it. You need to make sure it goes over the springs. Come on. get someone in. There we go. Just make sure it's not snagging on anything. There we go, pretty good fit. It's not snagging on anything. Happy with that. Next up is the sound insulation, if you've got it. This one's badly beaten up. At the end of the day it's hidden, and it is only sound insulation. I'll deaden it. Get in there. I do believe that's pretty good. Right, next up we have, make some room, the actual gear selector. It might be worth marking where you have your gear selector on here with some Tipp-Ex or something to line these splines up, but I pretty much know what angle mine goes at anyway. And note the way around it goes as well. The shoulder goes to the top, not the bottom. Let's have a try, see if I'm happy with that position. That is a serious short shift, first to second. Wow. That is, and third and fourth. That is short. Compared to what it was before, without even driving it, I can tell that's a huge difference. So we'll see what it's like for the actual driving of it. Finally, one washer and one 17mm nut on there. Right, tighten that up. Don't over tighten it, but just nip it again. That's good enough. Get all the junk out the way. Finally put the gator on as best you possibly can. I'm going to leave this loose for now in case I have to do another adjustment, but usually I'd have a zip tie around that. Let's see if I can push that in. And that is pretty much it. I'll put this down properly once I've had a test drive. But initially that is, whoa, short. I'll be happy if that works. It doesn't feel notchy. That's funny because it totally has taken out the notchiness of the other one, the problems I was having. I mean, I must have adjusted the Bayou Springs 10-15 times trying to get it set to work right, but until I drive it I won't fully know. But that is I've been thinking about this for ages and thinking whether it's worth doing or not. I've seen people say it is, others in forums have said it's a waste of time, but to me, that, I can't stop fiddling with it. I think I'll just do this for half an hour. Right, easy to do. Would have been easier if I wasn't filming it. It says 15 minutes and that's probably right if you have all the equipment, right tools. Mine went pretty straightforward because I have had it in parts before. There was nothing seized on. The only worry was the grub screw. That came out right. And for fitting back, just look for that grub screw, make sure you locate it properly. Initially I thought it was in, but I had my doubts, and it should sit flush with the form of the aluminium. And that's it, job done, and I shall test it and see whether it's worth the upgrade or not.